Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Revolution 250 podcast. Rev 250 is a collaboration among groups in Massachusetts planning ways to commemorate the beginnings of the American Revolution. I'm Bob Allison. I chair the advisory group. And 1773, 250 years ago this year, pivotal year. We all know about the Boston Tea Party, but the really critical event that drove forward the revolution was the publication of letters from Governor Thomas Hutchinson to others, and how they came into the press is a big story. And here with Jeremy Bell, who is an authority on this, who can help us unravel this mystery. Jeremy Bell is the author of several books on William Hogarth. He is now delving into a story about a side of Benjamin Franklin you might not have known. So Jeremy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Bob. Professor Allison, it's very kind of you to have me on.
Now, there's a lot about Franklin we think we know, but we don't. And one is that he actually wrote songs.
He did. He actually wrote 3 drinking songs. Thanks for that good introduction. I will sing you just one verse of the ode or the hymn to rum punch, which I believe he wrote to the 100th Psalm. It matches the music perfectly, which is classic Franklin. This is how it goes. Boy, bring a bowl of china here, fill it with water cool and clear, decanter with Jamaica right, and spoon of silver clean and bright. Franklin's hymn to rum punch.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And there are more where that came from, I understand.
Oh, yeah. I do all his drinking songs, actually. They're fascinating. His other one, the Antediluvians, were all very sober about Noah and the flood and the wine. And that's where we get that Franklin classic line that's on T-shirts all over Faneuil Hall. Those who drink water deserve to be drowned. Is one of the lines in his song.
It's amazing that Franklin has the resonance with drinking songs and T-shirts, unlike other founders.
It's true.
That side of him we want to know. Yeah. And so tell us about the Hutchinson Letters. I mean, I could tell the audience about the Hutchinson Letters, but you have a version of this that's really
Well, I'm fascinated when you say how pivotal they were, yes. And you can fill us in much more on the history of how important they were when Sam Adams gets them and fans the flames, really, of revolution. Yeah. And as you say, leads directly to the Tea Party and Concord and so on the road to revolution.
That's right, because there was already this fight going on between Thomas Hutchinson and the Massachusetts Assembly. And they wanted, because he said, the Parliament governs, you don't, that the Assembly is insignificant. And the Assembly wants Benjamin Franklin, who's their agent in London, to get the Privy Council to replace Hutchinson with someone more amenable. And in the midst of this, Franklin gets a hold of these letters from Thomas Hutchinson to Thomas Whately and others back in London, giving like an inside story of what's going on in Massachusetts politics, who these people are and why they are so deluded, exactly the kinds of things you might say to a political ally that you don't want your political enemies to know about. Things like, next time they do something like the burning of the Gaspee, we should have some of them brought to London, and the sight of a few of them in Executioner's Dock will calm things down here. And you can't expect to move 3,000 miles away from England and still enjoy all the rights of Englishmen. And he talks about the assemblies as Lilliputian assemblies. So when the Massachusetts Assembly hears this, of course, they're outraged. And this doesn't help smooth things over. And Franklin's the pivotal guy in getting these into the hands of Samuel Adams.
And it's been a mystery. Nobody's ever known where he got them or from whom. Several contenders don't really fit the bill because we have 5 or 6 different hints of who it was, but it was one of those secrets that Franklin took to his grave. What did you say when you came to the show, by the way?
Right. But Franklin said that 3 can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead.
I had never thought of bringing that in. Now it's in the book, which is a great line, so thank you for that. Professor, nobody knew where he got them or from whom. And in fact, Kenneth Pennegar, in his book, says one day a new piece of evidence will come to light, and we'll understand finally where and from whom. It was kind of glossed over because the letters, as you said, are so important, were so pivotal to the revolution. But whether they were from Pownall or John Temple, it didn't really matter so much to historians up to this point. However, it was in the study of Franklin in London that I'm very interested in, especially with his association with a chap called Sir Francis Dashwood, that I came across a newspaper clipping, a notice. There it is. Thank you, sir. A newspaper clipping that nobody had ever linked to the letters before. Now, this is in a paper that I'm going to leave with your audience. They can read all the details, and it's 5-6 pages. And it's also part of the show I do and the book. But let me just read a couple lines from the letters. The first clue, a certain baronet, this is reading from the newspaper line, maybe line 6. A certain baronet has access, a certain doctor is an intimate friend of a certain baronet. Dr. Franklin and Sir Francis Dashwood was the leading baronet of the day. A certain baronet has access to a certain house, not 100 miles from London. Anybody has access to their house. Sir Francis had access to a certain house, which was a church, the church on the top, on his estate on the top of a hill. It is most certain that letters might be conveyed without an electrical shock from the part of the worthy baronet into the hands of his philosophical friend. So where is a place 100 miles from London that Franklin went to many times? He stayed with Dashwood for weeks on end. Once he had his mail forwarded to Dashwood's house. Franklin worked for Dashwood. They went on holiday together. And I have a list of why Franklin and Dashwood was, as we would say today, besties. But where on Dashwood's estate could you not get an electrical shock? On the church that that Dashwood built on his estate was a great big wooden ball. And it was in the ball, you could fit 5 or 6 people. They couldn't get an electric shock there because Franklin had installed a Franklin rod to conduct the electricity. He was known to be in the ball where somebody said he was conducting experiments. John Wilkes said in a separate letter that Dashwood had his secret political meetings within the ball. And that's where I believe Franklin got the Hutchinson letters from Dashwood in a little wooden structure, which still exists. I think we're going to put a picture of it later. Still exists on top of a church in West Wickham in England on Dashwood's estate where Franklin visited.
Fascinating. So you mentioned that Franklin worked for Dashwood. Can you just elaborate what you mean? Dashwood
was the Postmaster General for the whole of Great Britain. Franklin, as we know, was Postmaster General for the colonies. So he was his boss. But more so, Dashwood was very pro-colonial rights and actually writes the Plan of Reconciliation many years before. That was actually adopted eventually, but by then it was too late. The war had begun. And also Dashwood was very, well, obviously they were fond, intimate friends, as the newspaper clipping says. And by the way, there's many more clues within that paper. But they were very good friends, and Dashwood supports Franklin in Franklin's support of William Penn. Dashwood actually erects a statue to William Penn on his land, on his estate. So they were very good friends indeed and worked together. And like I say, Franklin's there so much that he gets his letters forwarded to him. The famous hoax, because this is all a bit of a prank, the famous Franklin hoax of the King of Prussia was received at Dashwood's breakfast table.
Right. Franklin is staying there. He's been staying there for some weeks, and there's one fellow, Paul Whitehead, who gets the papers every day and reads through them, and he sees this. He's outraged, seeing this edict from the King of Prussia that he's now claiming England because his subjects had gone there centuries before. So now England is his domain, and they're going to have to obey the rules of Prussia and not compete with Prussia in trade. And everything in it are things that the British Parliament is imposing on the Americans. And now, for the same reasoning, that the King of Prussia now could assert his claim to England. And Franklin tells this story in a letter to his son that Whitehead reads this. He reads each paragraph, and people just say, they can't believe this. He's going to be sending troops next. And then finally he says, Whitehead begins to sense, maybe this is a prank. He says, I bet this is another of your damned American jokes. And it's, Franklin was happy no one knew. That is, he's not saying, yeah, I wrote that. He really does cover his tracks. And the only reason he tells people that he delivered the letters to Samuel Adams was because John Temple fights a duel with Whately's brother.
That's right.
Yeah. So the clipping also mentioned Alexander Wedderburn, the Solicitor General, who attacks Franklin in, the story actually goes on because then in January of 1774, Franklin is denounced at the Privy Council for sending the letters to America. And Wedderburn says he will hereafter cringe at being called a man of letters. And he's shown himself to be nothing better than a common thief. But Despenser and others in the circle continue to stick with Franklin as he's being...
Well, funny, in that Weatherburn's ordeal that Franklin has at the cockpit, what everybody knows about.
Yes.
Firstly, what was so eviscerating of Franklin was the way Weatherburn thought he was being clever with punning about Franklin electricity, calling him the conductor of all this, and you will get a shock. And funnily enough, the notice also puns with that electrical theme, saying that it will be shocking if the two gentlemen are fired because they both work for the crown. Again, they're both postmasters together. Also, there's another lovely Franklin's abridgment to the Book of Common Prayer was written at Dashwood's estate, and actually Franklin writes the introduction to it and mentions Dashwood in it. So they worked on the prayer book together. There's so many connections between the two. It's amazing that nobody has ever thought that it could have been Dashwood to start with. Yeah. There's the church. Oh, well done. That's fantastic. Hey, you just saw it. Somebody backstage just came up with that picture. It exists today. You can go. People have weddings in the church, and there's the ball upon which Franklin and some experts say that you could get 6 people. I think 4 is a squeeze, but there was a little table, and Dashwood met there many, many times. And again, like John Wilkes says, that's where he used to have his secret political meetings because nobody could hear what you were saying in a ball on a church on a hill.
Right. And now Dashwood seems like an unlikely character to be writing a book of common prayer.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you?
Well, Dashwood is all about the pranks. He's just such an impresario. He is quite a bizarre character. He loves dressing up as monks. You know where we're going with this, Bob. He dresses up as monks and he starts the Hellfire Club. This is another one of his. He has pagan marches through his estate. He has wild parties. And mostly
there's a secret tunnel underground to chambers far below the church.
Well, funny, let's put up that next, thank you for pulling that one in. Let's put up that next illustration because it doesn't get any more stranger. The ball on the church is like heaven. If you walked down the hill to the right, there is another mock church because Dashwood built it. It's the facade to the Hellfire Caves. And the blue part of this is a subterranean map that some Oxford University produced. It's a 2-dimensional subterranean that shows a series of caves. And the caves go all the way down. These were dug by Dashwood with the excuse of giving work to the unemployed men of the village. But curiously enough, they finish directly below the church. And they recently discovered that there was a shaft that would have connected the two. So this Dashwood, he has lots of time on his hands, he has lots of money, and he has a wild imagination, and he decided he would create this kind of Disney world of the hell and the heaven connected, and that was the theme for many of his parties, which he called, or what was called the Hellfire Club at the Hellfire Caves. You can go and visit them anytime in Wickham. One of the caves is called the Franklin Cave and actually has an effigy of Franklin there, just as evidence that Franklin was definitely down there in the caves.
Interesting. We're talking with Jeremy Bell, a freelance historian, and delving into the world of Franklin and Lord Dashwood. Dashwood had been Chancellor of the Exchequer, and someone said, this guy can't even balance a checkbook. How did he get this position? And so he does seem like an extraordinary character. And I don't know if you want to tell, or if you can tell a PG-rated version of what goes on in the Hellfire Club.
No, it's a simple.
Okay, thank you.
But in the show I do. So what I've done, I've produced this as a show, and Professor Allison, you were so kind to come along and see it, where I give, it's a long walk to wide. I mean, obviously I give the scholarly paper on Dashwood and the Hutchinson Letters. Well, why was Franklin with Dashwood in the first place? And that leads to going down into the caves and finding out what Franklin was doing when he was down there. Now, another shard of evidence exists now, because Franklin everybody had a monk's name. John Wilkes was Brother John of Aylesbury. Dashwood was, he was Brother Francis. Franklin, there he is. Well done. Somebody backstage is doing some great work. Thank you. There's Sir Francis Dashwood. Actually, can you see him in his monk's clothing? Yeah. I should have tried to send that picture to you. And Franklin, he had a moniker as well, and he was Brother Benjamin of Cookham. He's in the wine records of the beer and wine that was served in these caves during these parties. So he's Brother Benjamin of Cookham. And in the show, I give the reason, which is quite vulgar, I have to say, yes, why Benjamin chose Cookham as a place to come from. But the show goes through and shows many cartoons and prints of the time to show what they were doing down there.
Now, John Wilkes was one of the great radicals at the time, and his paper is suspended. The issue number 45 becomes a signal number, a cardinal number for the American patriots because of the suppression of issue number 45. So he's another one of this circle. And
let's remember that it was in the Hellfire Club that he wrote the parody of Alexander's Pope essay on women that was so disgusting, absolutely shocking, even by today's standards to read it. But it was read in the House of Lords by Lord Sandwich that was trying to close the Hellfire Club. And it did a lot of damage to Dashwood and the club. But that you can read it because, like I say, it's actually part of parliamentary records. John Wilkes and women. But America loved him because he, like Dashwood, like Franklin, was just so pro-revolutionary.
Right. And Franklin had said that if George III had a bad moral character and Wilkes had a good one, Wilkes could have brought down the monarchy.
Yes, he did say that. That's right. Franklin also, in a very classic Franklin, signs off when he describes Wilkes in a letter. He says, he's not worth a farthing.
Yes.
Now, he was also, Franklin wrote, fart proudly. What he was actually saying, he's not worth a fart. Yes. But he jokes around with a little bit of a riddle. He's not worth a farthing, says Franklin. So they didn't get along towards the end, I think, because Franklin loved Dashwood so much, and Wilkes broke away from the Dashwood sect. But he was another that helped America get its independence. And this is, I'm just thinking, this June will be the 250th anniversary of the letters being read. So we really are having this podcast at the perfect time, talking about the beginning of the events that led to 1776, because June is the 250th anniversary of that. So I love the way you're staggering these in chronological order, 250 years later.
And it is something that I think this pivotal event. You have in January, the governor and the assembly get into this real struggle over things. And by the way, this is when Samuel Adams' portrait is done, where he's pointing at the Massachusetts Charter. He's holding in his hands the instructions from the town of Boston. As the governor said, the governor gets to decide when you meet. And the assembly is saying, no, the charter says this. So they're having this fight. Then Franklin gets these letters, sends them to Samuel Adams, says these are secret letters. You cannot publish them. But then what Adams does is the door to the assembly chamber is locked. They read the letters out loud, and people go off. They remember certain lines from them, which they then repeat. And then this really helps to build the mystery about these and what kinds of things is he saying behind our backs. And then
Yes.
Adams announces after a couple of weeks, I found another set that can be published. And this is one of the best-selling documents ever printed by the Massachusetts government, the letters of Thomas Hutchinson and others. And it ruins Hutchinson's, any shred of reputation he had left here was ruined. He asks leave to go back to England to plead his case. At the same time as Franklin's arranging for the Privy Council to have a hearing into the Assembly versus Hutchinson, and that's scheduled for January. It's not a high priority in London, what's going on in America. But then the Privy Council hearing just happens 2 days after London gets news of the destruction of the tea. And that is something that's infuriated Parliament about Franklin, the Massachusetts Assembly. And without these letters, you would not have had that connection.
That's right. I mean, Franklin really thought the letters, when he was pulled in front of the council, he thought that the letters were going to help everybody make Hutchinson the scapegoat, get Hutchinson out of the colonies, and everything's going to be fine. Calm down, Sam. Hutchinson's gone. Yeah. Well, what do? They stick with the guns. Classic British parliamentarians. They ignore the evidence and they make Franklin the scapegoat. Says, no, it's not Hutchinson, Franklin. It's you. You are the problem. You've got to go. Right. And that's where Franklin probably just threw up his papers and says, oh my goodness, it's all over. The game's over. They're never going to come to their senses. They didn't use, I gave them an excuse, says Franklin, didn't use it. And then he really flees before he's arrested. They were going to arrest him to try and find out who gave him the letters. They had another court case from Temple, or was it Watley? And he would have been ended up in the Tower, they think. So he comes over, but it really was, you said, Sam Adams. If it wasn't for Adams taking the letters and printing them, Hutchinson would never have had his ordeal. So we do have Sam to thank for running with this, as it were. Stacey Schiff's new book is fantastic on Sam Adams, and she explains a lot of that. She actually wrote to me and said, this is the quote from Stacey. She says, it never occurred to me that anybody might adequately solve this enduring mystery. Because in her wonderful book, she talks about how it was always a mystery. Nobody knows where the letters came from. But also, as we discussed with Sam Adams, they were pivotal. This was important stuff.
We're talking with Jeremy Bell, who has been unraveling the mystery of how Franklin got the Thomas Hutchinson letters, which then bring down Thomas Hutchinson. And also, Franklin goes into that hearing of the Privy Council, as you said, thinking, okay, we can get rid of Hutchinson, replace him with someone who can get along with the Assembly and save the empire. And Wedderburn spends 2 hours excoriating Franklin, saying, mark that man. He's not here. He's not content to be here as the agent of a provincial assembly. Instead, he imagines himself the ambassador of an independent empire. And it's Dr. Frank mocking him. And all around the room are people who had been Franklin's friends over these years. And they're enjoying this. They're enjoying seeing this guy getting his comeuppance. I mean, who does he think he is? And he leaves the room thinking the empire's not worth saving. He's on the other side. Although the Adams has never really come around to trusting him, I think.
No, that's right. They don't. They think he's kind of working for himself as well. And there's lots of evidence to show that he was playing the game, as Franklin does, but he comes out on our side in the end. You're talking about that ordeal and when he is, his ordeal there in front of Weatherburn. And every account talks about how he remained motionless, absolutely motionless. He didn't look left or right. It was actually a clever game because then he didn't have to answer any questions. Wedderburn, this crazy Scottish Solicitor General, goes off, and like you say, everybody's laughing for an hour or so. I actually believe, because now I've said that it's Dashwood that gave him the letters, that Dashwood was in the room. He was one of the lords. Now, maybe that is why Franklin stares ahead, because if he looked at Dashwood, he might give the game up. So maybe that's why he stares ahead. He does say he has one friend in the room. Another said there was one person in the room that he trusted. It would have been Dashwood. So he was actually there in this, like you say, this ordeal where Franklin just turns and says, I cannot save this union. Sam, let's fight.
Yeah. Now, you have Franklin and Dashwood and a lot of these other individuals are also Freemasons. In a couple of your books, you do unravel a lot in what William Hogarth, a lot of Hogarth's drawings showing the Freemason iconography. I wonder if there's much you can trace in Franklin and Freemasonry from what your research.
Oh, you've let the Masonic cat out of the bag, Professor Allison. Would you believe, and I've written 3 books on Franklin, the first,
Hogarth.
Hogarth, goodness, got my Hutchinson and my Hogarths confused here. Actually, these are Hogarths. My flat in Beacon Hill has Hogarths in every room. Hogarth was a Mason. Dashwood's a Mason. In one of Dashwood's portraits, he shows a Masonic sign. Hogarth shows the same Masonic signs in his work, actually, the Harlot's Progress. I believe Franklin then sports the same sign in his portrait, the one that's hanging in the White House. The title of the article is "There's a Freemason in the White House." So yes, they're all Masons, but curiously enough, and I love the art history, they actually portray one of the secret signs within all their portraits. So I've got a page in the book that has all 3 portraits of Dashwood, Franklin, and actually Paul Revere is showing the same sign in his famous painting. But maybe that's another Rev 250 we should discuss.
Yes, that's fascinating. And of course, the Franklin portrait that's in the White House was painted in 1768 in London. So it is when Franklin is part of this world.
Exactly.
And that's the one. And he has the bust of Sir Isaac Newton above him.
That's right.
I'm not going to give the titles of your books here, but one of them has been called, finally, an art book for people who don't go to galleries. And you do have a way of unpacking these paintings and showing things that we might not have observed.
Well, that's what I want to do in the show. So just to chat a bit about the show, which again, you were very kind to come along.
Well, it's a great, I do recommend it. Yeah, the Ben Franklin sit-down walking tour.
Not many scholars like as yourself, sir. You're very kind and you're very supportive. Everybody I've met who knows you has said what a supportive chap you are. And you were very kind to come down to the Bell in Hand in the salubrious area of bars around the Green Dragon. And I'm doing a show for tourists. So it's really fun. It's 300 slides. I talk about the Freemasons. I show that slide and many more to just explain why Franklin was in the Hellfire Club and just his naughty side, really, which has been acknowledged. We all know that. But I've spent a long time collecting a lot of illustrations that really show what he was up to. And it's just for tourists. It's not really an academic show at all. So it flies through 300 slides. I sing songs. We have rum punch. We have a dark and stormy. Every time Sam Adams' name is called, we all raise our glasses and toast Sam Adams with his very beer. And I think you've put up the link to it. It's on Eventbrite.
Yes.
I hope to be doing more, not just in the Bell in Hand. So please, if you want to come and be entertained, the next one's the 24th of April, and then I hope to be doing it first Monday after that. But I would love to come to some of the institutions that is part of your audience, Robert. Sure. So if anybody's listening that would like a show on Franklin, I will bring the projector with me and the dark and stormy rum punch as well.
Very good, very good. So you'll supply the slides and the punch.
And the punch. I will supply rum to you. I promise. No, it's good fun. So many times, I think, with the build-up to 1776, with your fantastic Revolution 250 programs, it is fun to have something for, like you said before, those who don't go to art galleries, or those who don't really need all the dates and all the figures, a fun sit-down walking tour. For those who are too lazy to even walk around Boston to see the buildings, you let your eyes do the walking, sit down, let me put a Sam Adams in one hand and a rum punch in the other, dark and stormy, and let me give you just a circuitous history lesson on what Franklin added and what Sam did. Sam Adams, if I had a beer, I would raise it.
Or an opportunity to view history in a different way. And it's, I think, something we need to do, and drawing in new audiences to this. So, yeah.
Yes, very much, because the tourists are going to come in their millions as we get closer and closer. And the Tea Party Museum does such a great job at that. Really, they don't dull it down, but they make it much more palatable, so much more enjoyable for a member of the audience who's not so into, like I say, more of the dates and the arguments. And so we're very lucky in Boston. We're going to have fun in the next 3 years, I tell you.
We are. And remember, it was ordinary people in the streets who were doing this. It wasn't the academics who were leading the revolution. It was the ordinary people who were really pushing this movement.
Yeah. And they were all Harvard scholars, were they? I mean, didn't 80% of the real revolutionaries all have a Harvard degree in Boston? Hutchinson,
well, I don't know. I don't know that academics could lead a revolution. I think it would require too many committee meetings. And the thing academics like most to do is to talk, and not to talk to each other, but to talk. I mean, you don't know how difficult it is for me to sit here and have someone else do the talking. But as an academic, the only voice I want to hear is my own. I always say Thomas Hutchinson probably would have been a college professor had he lived in a different era. And what college professors like to do is give long lectures. And that's a great thing for a professor, terrible thing if you are actually a politician, because you need to engage with others. So, yes. So,
what about your Franklin DVDs with the great courses? That was fantastic. If you haven't out there,
thanks for the plug.
The great courses on Franklin. That was like 27 lectures. It was fantastic. I got so much information on that.
And there's more. Jonathan's posed a question about whether Franklin and Hutchinson ever met, and yes, they did. In fact, they were together at the Albany Conference in 1754, and they had, but Franklin is appointed by the Assembly to be their agent, and the British government doesn't recognize that colonial assemblies can have an agent. So he keeps getting dismissed by the Secretary of State when he goes to present his credentials, because he says, no, the Assembly can't send you as an agent. He's there already. And he was Pennsylvania's agent. He was New Jersey's agent. He was Georgia's agent. When Massachusetts appoints him, they say, no, you can't have an agent because we just want to go through the governor. So, yeah, they did meet. Hutchinson did graduate from Harvard. Franklin never attended Harvard, and he's really self-taught. And in fact, one of his silence do-good essays mocks Harvard as turning out people who are, how does he put it? He says they are too proud to beg, and to live by their wits is impossible. That they can't function in society. He said they learn nothing more than what they would learn at a dancing school. They learn how to enter a room genteelly, and it's really a terrific satire of Harvard College in the 1720s. And you can also sense that, and then when Franklin does start his own academy, it's not going to teach Latin and Greek. It's going to teach the living languages and practical things, as opposed to, although Franklin himself knows Latin and Greek, he has taught himself Latin, Greek, and Hebrew.
And Hebrew, really? I did not know that.
Yeah.
Yes, I know that he set up his institution, and that's still. I met one of the professors from the Latin school that still has a Franklin medal, so he's very much alive within the school there. It's fantastic.
He is. And in fact, they claim him as an alum in their auditorium. They have the names of illustrious alums, and Franklin is up there, even though he attended for just about a year or so. And the Franklin medal he created in his will, sending £100 and saying, have this made into gold medals to give to the top scholars. And they're still, it's not the original gold, but they are still presented to the top scholars from the Latin.
Isn't it fantastic? He only had like an elementary education, yet he gets honorary degrees from Oxford from Edinburgh. Right. And then, another thing I'm very interested is in this popularity of Franklin, and I call it the curious cult of Dr. Franklin. And actually, the show I'm doing ends with maybe 100 slides of just how popular he's become, even in modern day culture. I mean, the number of people, you saw the slides of how many people have Ben Franklin tattoos is shocking. Or he's bobblehead dolls. He's in cartoons. It's amazing, the cult, and which is what we started with, he's on T-shirts. Right up to about 2026, you're going to see 100 T-shirts walking of Franklin's walking on T-shirts around Faneuil Hall. Young people love him. He's such a character. I loved studying him for 20 years.
I can see that, and I love studying him too, because you always learn something new, and you've really shown us new sides of Franklin and new things to delve into with Franklin. I mean, the different. There was some fear if he wrote the Declaration of Independence, he would embed so many puns in it, and so many that it would lose any meaning. I mean, he was a great literary stylist, but also fond of using words. And you've mentioned a couple of examples, and I know there are others.
Well, actually, can Andrew put up that last slide of Franklin? The other, there you go. Franklin, as you've never seen him before. I have collected artworks on Franklin and how curious people portray him and what fun people have had with him, and nothing says it like that. Like I say, that's what I want to show. I want to give, again, tourists and people who have a slight interest in Franklin a very humorous side of him, and sing his songs and have a laugh, because he really is, what a character. Amazing. And Boston's own. Boston, we must claim him.
That's right. That's right. He was born here, and he moved to Philadelphia, and he brought a lot of Boston with him to Philadelphia. And
I think so. Yes, you can imagine.
Yeah. So
it's great.
So we've been talking with Jeremy Bell about Benjamin Franklin and the mystery of the Hutchinson Letters and lots of other things. By the way, Jeremy, before we close, do you have a favorite portrayal of Franklin by an actor you might have seen over the course of your...
Oh, you are so good at leading things in. Thank you, Bob. I know that a lot of scholars will find a lot of problems with the History Channel's 3-part series called Sons of Liberty.
Yes.
But I loved it. I really did. I understand there's inaccuracies, and we can all see those. But what a story, and how well told. It really gives you an idea. And thank you, Bob, because the chap who plays Ben Franklin is called Dean Norris. And not that I watch it, but apparently he is the main actor in Breaking Bad. And actually the actor himself calls himself Badass Ben, is the name that he gives to the character he plays. And it is quite fantastic. So Sons of Liberty, History Channel, and watch for Badass Ben.
Badass Ben. You know, I got angry calls from people because apparently I was a consultant on that, and friends disowned me for having been associated with it. So,
I didn't know that. I thought it was fantastic. Wow.
Okay, well, I'll have to watch it. You know,
I watched it 3 times, Bob. I've watched it 3 times.
Okay, well, thank you. Thanks for the plug. So,
can I end with one last drinking song?
Yeah,
for tonight we'll merry, merry be. For tonight we'll merry, merry be. For tonight we'll merry, merry be. Tomorrow we'll be sober. Ben Franklin's sit-down walking tour. Come see me at the Bell and Hand in Boston. Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Jeremy Bell, thank you, and thank you for sharing a couple of Ben Franklin songs. And I want to thank again Jonathan Lane, our producer, and our listeners all around the world. So if you're in one of these places and you want some of our Revolution 250 material, send an email to Jonathan Lane, that's jlane@revolution250.org. And I want to thank our friends in Pensacola, Florida, in Mumbai, in India, in Edinburgh, and in Newton Aycliffe and Durham, and in Huntington or Ghent, West Virginia. Thanks for listening. And now I think we have time for one more song. We'll be piped out on the road to Boston.
Go on. Oh.